Welcome back. It's that time of the week. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, which every week and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week we're going to dive back into Lightroom Classic and we're going to take a look at a photo that was given to me by my friend and fellow Park Cameras employee Andy Steele. He took this of a train in the night. It was around the Halloween time, so kind of a spooky image, but it was a very, very difficult one to photograph because it's a moving train. You're dealing with very much a low light situation. There's a lot to kind of work out and deal with, and unfortunately it is a touch underexposed. So we're going to take a look at how we can kind of fix this image in Lightroom. Of course, this was shot in RAW, so we do have the ability to really pull this photo where we want it to be. We've got a lot of room to play around, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's dive in and take a look at this photo. You can see it is really dark. Night photography is difficult at the best of times. This can easily happen, and here we are. But we can absolutely do a lot with this photo. Now you can see that this was taken at f2.8, 1/250th of a second. Of course, you've got motion in the photos. That plays a role in this as well. ISO 1000. So we're sort of playing with a reasonably dark photo here. Immediately, we want to brighten this up so we can see what we're working with. So we're going to go ahead and up the exposure. Now, when we do that, we probably want to go somewhere like this. We can always play with this again later. But you can see that we're actually dealing with a really interesting bit of lighting here where we have got some light in the sky. We've got lighting kind of around the train, on the train itself, and of course the face of the train, this kind of skull, looks really, really cool. So I think initially this looks really good. I think probably we don't need all of this foreground in the image. So we're going to go ahead and do a crop. We're going to go ahead and put this in a 16:9 crop because I think that works best for this photo. And I'm actually going to go and just reduce this down because I just don't feel like we need quite as much of it. There we go. That's a little bit nicer. I think the train is kind of a bit more centered. I might even just rotate this a touch. Something like that, maybe. Okay, I quite like that. I like the train moving through the image like this. So let's try and work with what we've got here now. I quite like this so far. Immediately, one of the big issues that we've got, of course, where we've boosted this so much in terms of the exposure, is we now have a lot of noise in the image. But that is reasonably straightforward to fix within Lightroom. So what we're going to do is actually come down. Before we do that, we might just boost some of the shadows here, a little bit of clarity, nothing too crazy, and a bit of vibrance. And I might just warm this up a touch as well. Of course, we can also change all of this after we go ahead and denoise, but that is what we're going to do next, is just deal with this noise we've got in the image. So let's come down here in Lightroom to the detail panel. I'm going to click denoise. Now, it's even easier than it used to be. It's crazy in Lightroom how unbelievably useful this is. This is actually done using AI. It's a very, very quick process. And as you can see, Lightroom has, all I had to do was tick that, and Lightroom has done an incredibly good job of denoising the image. If I zoom in now, we've definitely lost a tiny bit of detail, but it's nothing crazy, and we've lost a lot of the noise in the sky. Now we can still work with that a bit further. There's more we can do with that, and we absolutely will. What we're going to do next is probably come back up. I'm actually going to warm this image a little bit more, and I might just bring some magenta in as well. Something a little bit like that. So we can play with the white balance. We might come back to that. I'm not sure that we're quite done with that yet. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and use the masking panel, and I'm going to select the sky. And that's because I still want to get rid of some of the noise that's in the sky. I'm going to bring the contrast up a bit within the sky. I might bring the blacks down a touch. Just want to affect this top left part of the sky. I quite like that, actually. And then the next thing I'm going to do is actually come down here to clarity, bring that down. I'm going to bring the texture down a little bit as well. Not too much. If you see I bring that all the way down, it starts to get a little bit much. I think that is probably everything I'm going to do with the sky for now. I think that's actually done quite a good job of just helping a touch to kind of pull that together. We're still going to have a bit of noise. You know, we're really pushing and pulling this image to its limits. But I think that's done, you know, a pretty good job of taking the photo to a more usable spot. The next thing we're going to do here is go ahead and create another mask. We're going to do a radial gradient across the sort of middle of this image. Something like this. I'm going to bring the exposure up a touch just so we get a little bit more exposure coming from this train. I quite like that. And then we're going to go ahead and do a linear gradient, something along the lines of from the bottom up. Now we're going to do something like this, but then I'm going to subtract another linear gradient, bring that up from the bottom, and just do something like that so that we actually end up with the mask we have now more in the center. I'm going to bring that up a touch, bit of contrast. We probably don't want to go too crazy with this because we lose an awful lot of detail in this foreground. You can see a bit of color starting to come through, a bit of green, but it is enormously noisy down there. So we don't want to go too crazy. I'm actually going to go ahead and use a brush to just get some of this, something like this. I'm going to go ahead and bring the saturation down a bit, something like that. And actually I'm going to bring the texture down a little bit as well. This is quite a challenging photo to work with, but you know what? We've come a long way already. I mean, let's look at before and after. So something like this. This is where we can use the backslash key on the keyboard. Of course, this is the before. It's quite a serious difference. This is the after. So we really have, I mean, there's a lot that's happened there, right? It's like turning the lights on and off. That's pretty significant. What I might do next, and this might even be the last step. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and do a radial gradient on this face on the front. And I'm going to bring the highlights down, bring back a little bit of the sort of detail on that face, because I think that's just needed. So let's turn that off and back on. This is where we've got to. The last thing I'm going to do is actually come down on the left. I'm going to use one of these cinematic presets that's built into Lightroom. So these come with Lightroom. And the reason I'm going to do that is we've got some interesting colors to play with here, but I really think some of these presets, especially the cinematic ones, can maybe bring the most out of this photo. So let's go ahead and look at some of these. I really, really like that, for example. It's very stylized, but I think what we need to do with a photo that we're doing this much work to is probably lean into the stylization of it as opposed to kind of worrying too much about the, you know, the kind of reality of it, you know, how authentic does it look? I think, you know, we maybe want to play around a little bit, especially with the nature of the subject as well. I quite like that one as well. Let's just have a little browse through some of these. We're just mousing over these and kind of seeing what they look like, but they're really helping unify those colors a little bit. I quite like that one as well. I actually really like that one, especially for this area down here. Was that CN08? Yeah, that's a nice one. CN08 looks good. CN01 I think looks great. And then we've got CN02, which looks a little bit more, you know what? I think we're going to go CN02 because I think we're going to click that and we're going to actually bring the amount down. So we're just reducing the amount this preset is applied, but it really helps tie a lot of this photo together. And what I might do is come down to the HSL sliders. This is affecting the hue, saturation, and luminance. And I might just pull the yellow down towards the oranges a little bit more and the orange down towards more of a burnt orange. I really, really like that. In the saturation tab, I might just bring that blue up. You know what? The photo's starting to fall apart at that point. So we're not going to go too mad with that. I might just come into the luminance tab though and just bring the oranges up a touch, the yellows up a touch. If I bring those blues up, does that start to... Yeah, we don't want to do too much there. We're starting to reach the limits of how much we can play with this. Finally, there's a couple of small distracting spots there and there that might be spots on the sensor, which is where we've really pushed the kind of limits of this. We can really easily get rid of that. We're going to come up here to the remove tool, and all I'm going to do is use the actual remove tool here. A pretty small cursor, which I've just changed with the mouse scroll wheel. I'm just going to do both of those, and I'm going to go ahead and click remove. And it's going to use AI. I probably didn't even need to use generative AI for that, to be honest. It probably isn't even necessary, but it will just do a nice job because it's a very easy area to sort. I don't even need to check the different versions. We can just look at that. Perfect. That just removes those slightly distracting elements. That kind of finishes off the image. So that's it. I think that this image, if we look at before and after now, this is before. Obviously, it was completely dark. You can't really see much at all. This is where we've got to. I'm actually really happy with that. I think that's a nice photo. And I think given the challenging situation where you have motion and a serious lack of light, that's actually come out really quite nicely. You know, how would you take that better in the first place? I guess you're probably going to be bumping that ISO up a lot. I guess in a perfect world, maybe you're using an even faster lens so that you have an aperture, something like maybe even something like 1.8 is going to make a big difference. 1.4 is certainly going to help. Then you're introducing a situation where you're dealing with possibly a little bit of a shallow depth of field issue, but I think maybe that would help. Bump that ISO up. But it's, you know, I'll also say this. In a situation like this, you really just have the one shot. That train's coming past. you have to get that shot. And I think actually this is a great job. This is a great photo. And a few tweaks in Lightroom, and I think it looks great. I think you can be really proud of that photo. If you'd like to see more of these kind of tutorials where we're actually looking at photos taken by other people and seeing how we can kind of work with them in Lightroom, I think this is really fun. So whether that's something that you guys send in, other people around Park Cameras, maybe we can take a look at that. I think it's a really fun way to explore some different things within Tutorial Tuesday. Anything else you'd like to see, let me know in the comments as well, because that's always super interesting. Otherwise, don't forget you can check out a full list of all the kit that we use for these videos, these photos, all that kind of stuff down in the comments below or down in the description below. I'll pop links down there so it makes it super easy to check all that out. I will, of course, see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.